Hi, read by Betsy Leonard for Grace Leonard's article, How Does Snapchat Influence Research About Social Development of Generation Z Children in Comparison to Those Who Grew Up in Generation X? Introduction. Let me introduce myself. My legal name is Gracelyn, but people call me Grace. Some other nicknames I go by are Gracie Poo 1000, Grace Photodump, G. Leonard, and G. Leonard, yes, with two R's. Those are my many different identities through social media, but one of the most used nicknames started at the age of 12 was Grace.Leonard20. And fortunately, I chose a username that did not embarrass me, unlike my friends who stuck with Sparkly Unicorn 113. Snapchat has been a prevalent app in my and my friends' lives, and as we can make plans and share pictures. Even though I have used the app daily since I was the prime age of 12, there are negative aspects of the app that I did not take into account. I've been told that there are twice as many teenagers with depression compared to just generations ago. There are 42% more teens facing depression than when our parents were growing up. Research have found environmental influences, like Snapchat. They have increased Generation Z's rates of youth mental health. Our parents' Generation X, born between 1965 and 1981, were raised differently than our generation and without the challenges of public health crisis of the digital age. Our parents dealt with depression, anxiety, and loneliness growing up, but according to research and statistics, not in the same multitude that Generation Z children deal with today. There are 363 million daily Snapchat users, mostly ages between 15 and 24. The popularity of the app boosts engagement as well as the ability to capture memories, but along with the perks, there are detrimental consequences. Researchers have found that teenagers today are more prone to risky impulse like drugs, alcohol, and sex, which can lead to addiction and dangerous behavior. Our parents were still drinking and doing drugs while growing up, and slightly more prone to smoking, but no one was recording their actions. Generation Z children can view almost anything through Snapchat, which leads to the fear of missing out, FOMO, and isolation. To understand generations of teenagers and the impacts of Snapchat on social development, it has been advised that parents and educators need to be vigilant and learn alongside Generation Z to find solutions. Summary. Snapchat is an intriguing app as you are connected to various people, but it is a platform made specifically for you. Throughout Snapchat, you have a discovery selection that promotes creators and videos that interest you based on how often you click on the link, as well as recorded data about interests through other forms of social media. To add to the uniqueness, as Snapchat users, you can choose who you want to add or add back, making the platform designed for each user. Snapchat provides many great features to benefit each user in their best interests. To fully gauge the public idea of how Snapchat makes this generation of users feel, an indirectly public observation was necessary. Most commonly, while researching, a correlation between Snapchat and mental health problems was apparent. There is the term public health crisis of the digital age, presented by author Nassar Ghaemi in the article Snapchat Depression, sharing that there is a higher percentage of depression among teens today than among generations before. There is a strong correlation between social media usage and depression in adolescents, showing that there is more influence of environmental mental illness than biological. Ghaemi persistently shows the correlation between depression in youth due to social media that comes from media like Snapchat. This article adds information about how depression from social media leads to more dangerous and impulsive behaviors such as sexting, drinking, or doing drugs. These actions exhibited by youth start at an earlier age and expose adolescents to mental illness at a high volume compared to past generations. Another common theme seen through discussion groups was Snapchat users are looking for fast and efficient information. With this, many discussion groups were asking to find sexual content. There were many sources that links provided in these discussion groups, allotting people with certain desires to be fulfilled with just a click. The accessibility that the discussion groups states relates to Charteris article, Snapchat, Youth Subjective and Sexuality, Disappearing Media, and the Discourse of Youth Innocence. The author shares platforms like Snapchat destroys youth innocence and has an impact on adolescents understanding their expression of sexuality. Snapchat allows for a sense of freedom and experimenting for youth, but also addresses problems of privacy and consent through media like Snapchat. Continuing, another connection between my research and the discussion group is that there is a generational gap. Reddit groups wrote that the relationship between their parents and the differences in parenting today. And the comments show that there is more vulnerability in modern day, improving children-parent relationships. This article, Mental Health Awareness and the Generation Gap, written by author Baral, shares the term gap is misinformation, meaning that Generation Z is more likely to talk about their emotions and mental health compared to Generation X. The willingness and accessibility of proper health is important and has led to the current generation to have a greater mental health literacy, leading to awareness of mental health and providing healthier relationships with themselves and even their parents. There are mental health problems in teenagers today, which can be seen with social media like Snapchat. But Brock Hyber reminds generations that there are not too many daily differences between teenagers today and in the past. Instead, there's a difference in societal norms. The takeover of technology in modern teenage lives is because of the influence of media. Hyber mentions that 94% of teenagers have cell phones, with access to social media apps and viewing almost anything on the internet. Although Hybert continues to share the teenagers today and that they are not much different, media like Snapchat and recording these makes it seem like teenagers today have more rebellious. Whereas in reality, in the 1970s, 66% of teenagers had used marijuana, and in 2014, only 46% had used it. No matter the generation, teenagers have access to drugs and drinking, but Generation Z's teenagers can view these actions afterwards. Hyber importantly mentioned that teenagers of Generation X and Z cannot fully compare struggles as societal norms are different. The description. When I think of my past experiences with Snapchat, there is one distinct memory that immediately comes to mind. It was a Saturday night during my junior year, and plans for the night were being made. My good friend asked what I was doing, and because of the dumb high school drama, she was not invited to something that was happening that night. Selfishly, I wanted the option to go. But instead of telling her my plans, I decided to tell her I was staying home. But I could not stop there because my Snap Maps, my location on Snapchat, were on for her. So I decided the best solution was just to turn it off. My plans changed, and I did end up staying home that night. But the next day, she texted me saying, "Thanks for lying to me." She based her accusation because my Snap Maps were off. I responded by saying my Snap Maps were on and I did not know what she was talking about. The lies continued, but in the end, she apologized that she overreacted and I apologized for not being entirely honest. Looking back on the situation, I realized that it taught me two things. First, to be upfront with people, and hurting them by telling them the truth is better than being caught in a lie. The second is Snapchat can be toxic. The app can be made it easy to make plans with your friends through group chats and tools like Snap Maps, which can even be seen as a safety feature. But Snapchat also has a distrust to friendship. This personal incident brought anxiety and FOMO into my life, which is continuously reported in research focused on Snapchat as people can see their friends' locations and stories, leading to the sense of isolation. when not included. I am guilty of checking what my friends and mutual friends are doing, and even though I am not always going to be invited, it's still hard to see other people having fun from a distance, even if it's fake. Continuing as I was reporting by Snapchat usage through my auto ethnography, I found an enlightening pro to the app. I recognized the benefits and the connections and the ability to store Snapchat memories. On July 5th, as I was nannying and sitting by the pool, feeling like I had nothing to do, I Snapchatted with a friend from college, who I've not seen since the beginning of May. We caught up, sending pictures, videos, and even chats from our memory function from our 4th of July. I felt appreciative of the ability to communicate with friends some thousand miles away. There is a simplicity behind Snapchat that is very casual to keep in touch with people and does not feel as much of an effort as texting someone. This developed from the communication has become ideal for our generations and preferred compared to other modes of contact. Researchers do not include the benefits in the apps, often as focusing on the negative Snapchat brings to Generation Z. My usage of the app has changed as I no longer consumed by streaks and Snapchatting random people. And even though those things were entertaining before, I am now grateful to have Snapchat as it provides me communication with friends close and far away, and regardless of our level of friendship. The cyber ethnography I conducted also provides great insight, just as the auto ethnography did. But from an indirect observation, which involved an analysis of textual material, mostly from online discussion groups. Reading comments from the groups allowed me to observe Snapchat users publicly discussing their experience with the app. Initially, I thought the best way to observe was through direct public observation, but I found this to be wrong as people interact with others in more private ways. And Snapchat is specifically altered and designed for your desired usage. Although the form of conducting the cyber ethnography varied, and the takeaways from the discussion groups were very important. As mentioned before, Snapchat users want to access the fast and efficient information. Even though users want information as quickly as possible, there's also discussion groups overseeing that through Snapchat. Social injustices can be solved, which are not as quickly. The political discussion group that stood out to me was titled, "I thought Gen Z would be the generation to end racism." The discussion was very interesting. It was intriguing as it included opinionated one-sentence responses as well as educational comments with evidence. The well-thought comments in the discussion group keyed in on the fact that apps like Snapchat can help solve world problems. But interesting enough, the first step is that people, including Snapchat users in this generation, need to stop saying and posting offensive terms towards people. This is seen in the first step by many people in the discussion group as their arguments and claims made that verbal discrimination is an easier fix than other racist actions. Research groups discussed how generation believes that Snapchat can be positive social media platforms to change social injustice in our world, but the users need to use Snapchat effectively to see a difference. Another source I use to understand the social development that Snapchat has brought to Generation Z was through interviewing a friend. Addie Smith, a 19-year-old female from Denver, Colorado, shared how she has been impacted by Snapchat. Like others, Addie got Snapchat at an early age, at 11. She downloaded the app with her parents' approval, but she was excited to use filters, especially the dog one, and to be able to communicate with friends, even if it was through funny pictures and videos at the same time. She was excited to use Snapchat, but her initial excitement has decreased over the years. Addie shares that she now spends about 30 minutes a day on Snapchat. Although she alludes to the fact that she's been busy working, hanging out with friends, and enjoying being home from college, Addie's interest in Snapchat has decreased. Addie has matured and found herself using Snapchat for more reasonable things. But when asked if she would ever delete the app and with a hesitant answered no. I could not because of all the memories I have on it. I love seeing memories of what I was doing last year and many years ago. Addie continued to share that Snapchat can be exhausting as there is the pressure, FOMO, and anxiety that comes with the app, but she still values the communication aspect. Based on her thoughts, I followed up with a question, wondering how long she thinks Snapchat will be around. She responded with a reasonable answer. People will lose interest from our group in about 5 years, but it will be passed down to the generations, and the cycle will continue for a long time. This perspective is interesting as Addie's response shows that the generation is reliant on forms of social media, even when apps like Snapchat can bring negative impacts. As almost 20-year-old Addie brings insight to how communication will continue to be valued through social media, and our generation has influenced human connection through Snapchat. The analysis. Through research, time and time again, I was informed of the increased depression rates, anxiety, sexual assaults, reduced impulse control, and so on that have been influenced by Snapchat. Researchers, typically Generation X, who did not go through the same multitude and access of technology, are interested in seeing the social development of our generation. The researchers' unfamiliarity with the social media and Snapchat can lead them to see the app as the enemy, even when trying to have an unbiased perspective. The age difference between those being researched and researchers is significant, as there is a common bias that researchers do not acknowledge regarding age. Our society believes that with age comes wisdom, but regarding the research behind Snapchat, how can this be true if Generation X did not grow up with the same pressures of social media? I would like to argue that the age does not bring knowledge, instead, experience does. Our parents are concerned about how Snapchat will change this generation, but primarily focus on the negative, which brings judgment and bias, especially in research. Throughout my exploration of Snapchat, I have been influenced to agree with the harmful aspects of Snapchat, as there is a lot more research on the unfavorable behaviors that social media influences. Now reflecting on the information provided online, I question the reliability of research. For example, researchers state that teenagers who spend more than 3 hours on Snapchat are more depressed. But how do we know this data is correct? If I were asked about my Snapchat screen time, I would lie about it and about the time to avoid judgment and follow-up question. Based on observation, peers, and myself, I know that we rely on apps like Snapchat more than we like to admit. But it is a bad as research states, no doubt. Generation Z adolescents do experience anxiety and depression. But how can we compare generational differences as there are unique and various environmental factors? Starting in North America in the 18th century, the Age of Enlightenment, anthropologists started to study and understand human behavior in society. Instead, interested in how people live and behave, anthropologists immerse themselves into their own or different people's lifestyles and analyze culture. Anthropologists are supposed to be natural observers, and although their practices have evolved, there is still a bias, as anthropologists are primarily studying the culture completely differently. Their unfamiliarity and naivety lead to the obsession, as anthropologists are trying to relate to and understand a culture they cannot entirely fathom. The anthropologists and the researchers are trying to understand Snapchat, practice similar methods of observing, but they were not always impartial. Generation X adults are uncomfortable with the new forms of communication and accessibility that Snapchat brings to Generation Z's teenagers. There is a loss of power as there is so much information on the interest of Generation Z knows how to navigate. The lifestyle of Generation Z children is a very different from Generation X, as they are more focused on being outside when they were younger. Researchers who grew up more like Generation X and had different values see Snapchat as a main contributor of the digital public health crisis. I do not want to disregard that there is evidence supporting an increase of depression among this generation of youth, but the social interaction of Snapchat is not easily welcomed or comfortable for researchers. Generation X researchers disfavor Snapchat and support their opinions with the scientific fact that the brain does not fully develop until 25 years old, leading to the belief that youth do not make smart choices when having access to Snapchat. How do researchers of Generation X parents know this to be true? If they never grew up with social media and are not always accepting that society has developed along with this generation of teenagers, researchers see teenagers as immature, lacking wisdom, and less educated, and have been correlated to this environmental factor of Snapchat. This observation I have found through research Snapchat users, along with analyzing research, is that there is a lack of representation in experimentation. This was seen in the specific research around the social development of Generation Z's compared to Generation X. Repeatedly, there was research being done on teenager Snapchat users instead of the teenagers being included in the exploration of not only the consequences but the benefits of the app. Through the audio ethnography and interviews, I realized that our generation uses Snapchat has become the norm, and we portray the app differently than researchers who are trying to understand the basics of Snapchat. There is an evolution of technology and does not mean that our generation will always use Snapchat, as there are new apps like Be Real, TikTok, that engage teenagers and are also influence new forms of communication. When there is unfair representation, not all the aspects and perspectives of the topic can be accurately reported. There is common saying, know about us without us, meaning that activists cannot decide something without the group that is being represented. For example, I am white, middle class, college student who is passionate about elevating teen mental health. As I see friends, classmates, and peers, and myself deal with this illness. As someone who relates to these social issues, I should have an important voice in advocating for those around me as well as myself. The need for the involvement of underrepresented groups do not mean that researchers should not include their valuable knowledge and outside perspective. But I am indicating that there is a heavier need for those directly affected to be included. When participating in activism, it is hard to not adopt a savior mindset. But knowledge when you should support instead of being in charge is important. Inclusion should be seen through political and social movements for people of all ages. The representation continues in other movements such as the Black Lives Matter, Roe v. Wade, gay rights, and many others. Without the involvement and courage that comes from the minority groups, there would not be as much historical differences made. I adopt the Snapchat username grace.leonard20 when I was only 12 years old. In hindsight, I now see that I was young to be starting my online persona, and research agree that downloading the app too young can be dangerous. To be fair, there is scientific evidence that our brains are not fully developed until 25, but researchers also disagree with the amount of Snapchat use our generation uses because of social development that is altered. Researchers are intelligent and provide great insight, but they are missing the first-hand experience that our generation has. Snapchat has become an app where teenagers can communicate, make memories, and share what is going on in their everyday lives. Nonetheless, there are consequences from Snapchat like FOMO, addiction, and bullying. But as a society, our cultural norms have changed and continue to change each generation. Today, we heavily rely on our phones and social media. Researchers have done tremendous amounts of work to show different social development between Generation Z and X. But the main takeaway is that there is need for youth representation while analyzing Snapchat. I, along with my peers, are more suitable to understand the influences of Snapchat as we are particularly born with a phone in our hand. We need to be included in this research of the digital age as we can provide insight from our experiences. The big ideas extends to many different forms of activism as experience is more important than age and helps reduce bias for future researchers and social movements.
Thank you.